Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and
Hello.
together we are ThinkerThemer, and we've got a special top 10 today.
It is a top 10 best of all time solos. So that's really my top 10
I don't
solos.
usually play solo games.
No, Amy does. I'm the solo player of the house, and I had done a top 10 solo list a couple of years ago, but we've never done that on our channel. So this was actually, I did one with Rado on Rado's channel, and it was interesting because since then and now, there hadn't been a lot of fluctuation in the things that were in that top 10, and all of a sudden, boom, you'll see this time there was quite a lot of changes, which means there's actually quite a lot of fairly recent additions or things that I either recently became aware of or played more of and went, wait a second, this is amazing, or games that are actually quite new. So I'm excited to go through these 10 today.
I'm excited as well, and guess what? I tried them all.
I got to teach Amy, look, this is like, set her up, go, look, this is how I'd play solo, have fun, just yell out if you have any questions, and I'll leave you in the room. And that was actually a really exciting process for me.
It was very different for me too, and at the end of this video, I'll run through my ranking of Maggie's top 10, but otherwise I'll just chip in because now I've actually had a chance to experience them, so that was pretty fun.
And I feel like it was a bit of a journey of self-discovery for you as well.
It was, yeah.
Right, let's get started. So I'm going to start with my number 10, which is a brand new entry into this list, and it is... there's going to be a lot of side picking up. It's actually Mythwind, which is a game that we very recently covered. And it was interesting because it was we were fairly divided in terms of likes and not so much for me type scenarios. But this is a game that it's this sort of beautiful magical valley, and you have these magical sprites, and every single player plays as a different character with completely asymmetric professions and completely asymmetric mechanics. So each, essentially, a big part of the main puzzle is just each character is their own puzzle. There's no combat, and it's a truly kind of open world where you can just go and do whatever you want at whatever pace you want. It's cooperative, and there isn't really an ending. There is a story, so there's a core kind of story, so it could kind of come to a bit of a natural conclusion, but it's a game that you can just kind of continue playing. It doesn't just have a clear-cut end point in time. So I was really intrigued by that because one of my absolute favorite games is Stardew Valley, the video game, and it's very much sort of trying to capture that you're just in it for the world, for the day to day, and like doing these little tasks here. A lot of that grind, so like enjoying the grind of the day to day. And this game, again, I was very, very excited when it first was announced. When I first started opening it up and going, the way that it saves with the trays and the way everything's kept together is just so satisfying. And then we had that little moment of like, oh, wait a second, that's right, there isn't like clear goals, like clear end goals. And so I had a bit of almost like a disillusion. It's like you met someone and you're like, wow, I'm really into them. And then you're like, so maybe you're not everything that I thought you would. And then it's like, but you just can't help but want to hang out with them. You're like, but I do have a great time every time I'm talking to you. And then the more you hang out with them, the more you're like, I actually just really enjoy the day-to-day with you, even if it doesn't mean that we're going to have that. So this just sort of, I had a really interesting thing with this. And whenever I see it, I'm like, I just want to get it off the shelf and play it. I just lose myself in it. So that's why it's my number 10. Mythwind. I don't know if you want to say any quick comments about...
Look, I'm going to say that the solo game in this game is very similar to the multiplayer experience, because the multiplayer experience, you're kind of grinding at this like little puzzle that nobody else is involved in, and so
your character.
Yeah, so it's quite multiplayer solitaire anyway, and so when I played this solo, it feels just like the original game. So everything I kind of thought about the original game held true with this, but yeah, to me, I can understand why this, solo, this would be kind of like true to the original experience.
Yeah. And I just like that. It gives you like just a little goal here and there. So it gives a little bit of focus of what you're doing. But it's just like, I just find it so easy to just get caught up for hours and hours and hours. Even just with the core content, it's like over 100 hours of content though. There you go. So that's number 10, Mythwind.
It's so new as well.
Figure out a way of storing them as I go through them. So my number 9, we're going from a pretty big box to the smallest box I think that I have, and it's another new game, and it's For Northwood. This is such a charming solo trick-taking game where you are playing. So you've got this sort of line of different. What are they called? They're like all these different critters, and you're trying to convince them. Like they've got all these different fiefs, so kind of like regions that they control, and you're trying to have arguments with them in the form of trick-taking games, and you want to win a specific number of tricks for each one of them. And by doing that, you're going to convince them to be for Northwood, so they're now allies. And then you can actually, they all have their own unique ability. So then once you kind of get them on your side, you can use their unique ability to help you win some of the other areas that might be trickier because you might need no tricks or you might need the most number of tricks. So the artwork is adorable. The gameplay is so simple and yet so puzzly and satisfying because it's like, how do you do trick taking with 2 players? You essentially, it's like one card, and it's like trick is won or lost. But then their suit as well, like they all have a suit, and that's the trump for that whatever. So it's simple, but it's super puzzly, and it's that whole thing where you start playing, you're like, oh no, I've messed up. Okay, I see what I did there. And so you kind of have that progression of learning. And then there's a campaign mode. So it's like once you kind of get the gist of it, then you can go and do the full campaign with like separate challenges.
Yeah,
so
I really enjoyed this one. I like you get your hand of cards and then you're deciding how many tricks am I going to be able to win with this hand. And that in and of itself is like, should I go for like, getting all tricks, like getting 6 or 7, like getting a lot or very few. And then you've got these jack cards. So all the jacks in the suit are these helpful little critters that you're going to be able to tap and get these like special abilities to help you kind of mitigate against some of the luck of the card. So I'll talk about it more at the end of the video, but I really enjoyed this one. And this one is the first on your list that is solo only.
Yeah, the first one. Smith Win is, it's a multiplayer, but So there you go. So that is for Northwood, my number 9. And now we're going to my number 8. My number 8 was on my previous list, and it was number 8 on my previous list. So this one hasn't moved. And that is The Bloody Inn. This is probably the biggest outlier in terms of theme, because it's quite a dark and macabre theme and a fairly grotesque, a little bit, or hopefully a bit, like tongue-in-cheek type. But in The Bloody Inn, the theme is that you're running a bloody inn where people will check in and you'll make money from those guests who check in, but not all of them are going to check out alive. Because what you're doing is, as you're running this inn, some of these people will be murdered by you, and then you're going to be stealing the money that's in their pocket. Horrible concept as a theme. But again, it's it's sort of like a playing Halloween sort of during Halloween time. I play a variant of this that is like the peaceful inn, where I try and see what score I get by not killing anyone, which kind of, I'm not going to say it defeats the purpose. It sort of goes a little bit against the spirit of the
It really does. Actually,
game,
now that I've played it, I can't imagine playing it without
real challenge.
It's like a core part of the puzzle.
Well, yeah, but then it becomes a really, really strong challenge. So I love this because it's really card. It's kind of card management in that you've got your inn, you've got the different rooms, and you're setting out cards that are your guests. So you're welcoming your guests into different rooms, and then you can do several things. You can either bribe them, which means that they come to your hand and they become now allies that then you can use to take other actions, because every time you're doing any action, you need to usually spend the number of allies that character value has. So if I'm recruiting a value 0, I don't need to spend anything, but then usually their actions are going to be really weak. So then if I wanted to recruit a value 3, I need to have recruited at least 3 other allies that I will spend to perform any kind of action with that one. So you're going to be doing things like obviously recruiting them, building, helping them, getting them to help you build annexes, so like extensions, which are going to serve a double purpose. A lot of them just have an immediate ability. Some of them will just, by building that is another source of income, or they make things easier, or they give you storage for additional bodies that you might need to bury down the track. Or the other thing is murdering guests, which is the Bloody Inn. And so again, you need to have the right number of people, but they all also have a synergy. So all of the cards have an affinity to one of the particular actions. So for example, if I use a card that has a bribing affinity to bribe another card, that card then almost doesn't get spent. It kind of comes back to me. So this is a really interesting thing of like, figuring out how do I most efficiently use the combination of the things that are most efficient for this bit and that bit, and and if at any point you have you've killed someone but you haven't buried them, and you have a cop, like there's all these sort of police presence that's staying in the inn, they're going to run a police investigation, and if you're playing solo, you immediately lose the game. So there's all these different kind of tensions going on.
It is a game of hand management, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. There's a lot of like, how many cards do I actually have in my hand, because I have to pay for them at the end of the round as well, and do I have enough coin
to pay wages for all those allies?
Or do I just need to discard some because I don't have that much money? So it is a really interesting dynamic. I really enjoy the artwork.
So
it's beautiful.
And I think that was one of the first things that kind of pulled me in. But I just find that it's such a simple, like mechanically, sort of what you're doing is fairly, and the game itself is fairly quick as well. And so you can kind of play several games in a gaming sort of session. And I just find it so satisfying. It's like as soon as I finish, I'm like, okay, again, and again. So.
I'm going to say, I actually enjoyed the solo of this much more than the multiplayer game. So I've never really clicked with the multiplayer game of the Bloody Inn. And Maggie just loves it so much solo that I was like, I don't know why, but now that I've played it, much better as a solo experience.
Yeah,
so,
there you go. So it's the Bloody Inn. And now we're going to my number 7. 7. And it is another new one, and that is Witchcraft, which was the top of last year's small box game. So this is another solo only game. This is a sort of follow up from Resist. So it's a similar, mechanically very similar to the game Resist. I've never played Resist because I wasn't really into the theme. I didn't connect with as much. But in Witchcraft, you're running a coven of witches, and you're trying to protect the town from all these different, both supernatural and just menaces that are happening, but you're also trying to not reveal yourself too much that you're a witch, because you don't want to end up in prison or worse. And so you're managing this coven of witches where you can play them as either hidden or revealed. For the hidden, on their hidden side or the reveal side, when they're hidden, they can stay safe, so they're not raising any suspicion, but they're a lot weaker, the actions that they can take. If you play them revealed, you're now having to completely eliminate or discard that from the circulation of your deck, so that witch is gone because they've revealed themselves and now they're being put in prison. But it's a lot more powerful, and it's a game that is super punishing. Like, it's actually really, really hard. As you've got all these different missions, and then all of a sudden the challenges for those missions are revealed. And there's a couple of modes. So the main mode is you've got jurors that you're trying to convince to essentially say that you're innocent. And the way you do that is, as you're completing those missions, you're swaying, you're kind of you're persuading them. And so at the end of each round, you have an opportunity to go, do you want to go to trial? And that is you kind of pushing your luck a little bit, because they all have these cards that are kind of like their persuasion value. So like the threshold that they would need to meet for them to say, yep, you're innocent. So through some of the actions, you're going to be able to sneak peek at some of those cards. The values vary a lot. And so you might be like, yes, I think maybe I've convinced them.
Maybe I've convinced
their values up enough. So, but there's a lot of different ways to lose. So it's like, well, obviously if you go to trial and it doesn't play out, then that, there's different variations of that. But then also there's going to be villagers that are going to be dying along the way. So if at any point you lose 5 villagers, and some of the cards have like 3 villagers in the one card, so you're like, oh no. And then also if you fail a couple of missions, or you end up with getting too many curse cards. So it's incredibly, like, there's so much. The other mode is a campaign mode that is even more thematic and longer. And there's just so much game, and so clever and so challenging and so beautiful. I really love the artwork as well in this, in such a small box, that is just so impressive and so satisfying.
Another game that has a lot of hand management, as almost you get the feel of like a deck builder slightly, because you're adding in cards that are curses that are going to muddy up your deck. You're also, they have the ability to recruit new witches into the deck as well. And then there's the hand management side is really interesting, and I didn't realize this until I played it, that there's a lot of synergies between different family members. So if the witches have the same surnames or belong to the same family, they often have synergies with each other. So when you draw your cards for the round, you're looking at, well, maybe I should play these together, and maybe they both need to be revealed, or maybe they both need to be hidden in order to get the best of these benefits. So that to me was actually really interesting. I also found this game really punishing, but there's a lot of nice choices along the way too. So So those challenges or missions that you can, you can use that as an attempt to win the game, as if you can get through all of the missions. There's a really nice sense of the choice of mission. So you have 3 to choose from, and which one am I going to go after based on how much power I have in my hands or my ability to conquer that mission. But also the missions relate to the jurors as well. Yeah. So it's like, well, that one's going to give me a lot of persuasion with that juror that I don't have a lot of persuasion with right now. So maybe I should just try and attempt that. So there's a lot of really like cool decisions.
I also love with that, like the thematic link between the type of mission and the juror, like their personality and why they would be more invested in that case being resolved or that case being kind of, I love that. There's so much thought and care put into this. So that is excellent. So that is witchcraft. I'm going to start losing track.
Number 6, right?
So
number 6.
Yeah, so that is, okay. Now, this is actually, this next game, I had already in my previous list, but it slid down a bit. I still absolutely love it though. And it is Newsfjord. So Newsfjord is a Uwe Rosenberg game where you are running a fishery. Is it like a fish kind of company? And you are hiring some of the local elders to help you kind of make your actions more powerful. You are issuing shares into your company to generate some cash. Then you're buying shares so that you can get some fish dividends or fish events, as we often call them. And you're building up your fleet so you can have like essentially generate more fish, because fish is one of the main currencies, and also constructing some buildings along the way. So it's classic kind of it's your classic sort of Euro worker placement type game with resource management. It's just so simple and streamlined and satisfying, and it actually plays fairly quickly. Like it's a game that, you know, it doesn't take forever to kind of get through, and you get a really big Euro sort of satisfying, like you can scratch that itch. It just sort of fills that. It fills that gap or fills that need in a fairly tight amount of time. And the way it actually, the solo mode plays, because this is also a multiplayer, it plays 1 to 5 usually. The solo mode is super simple in that you are just placing out all your workers and there's no automa or anything to facilitate. Then you have a different color and you've essentially just blocked yourself. So with the next color, it's still you, but now you're having to go around the workers that you placed the previous round. And then you usually would, for the next round, you're recalling those workers, and now I'm going to work around the ones that I just placed in the previous round. So it actually is super, super smooth, and it just allows you to explore the game with such ease. And I just, every time I play it.
This is an Uwe Rosenberg that's always been towards the top of our list. We absolutely love this game. It is, it's not... I would say it's not as complex as some of his other games. It's pretty straightforward, and for that reason, it's really easy to set up and get into. It's always been one of our favorite 2-player Euro experiences as well, just because of the ease of setup, and it plays really nicely. This was my first time, of course, playing it solo, and it's really interesting because Maggie on the channel always talks about her distaste for automas in the ones that are extremely complex and kind of mimic another player or an opponent. And playing this, I can totally understand why Maggie really enjoys the simplicity of some of the Uwe Rosenberg titles where you're just blocking yourself. So it's worker placement, but you have, you're playing multiple colors because it does make it just super, super smooth, super easy, not much to keep track of. And it feels like you're always in the mindset of your own game. Like you're not disrupted by this admin of having to facilitate an automa. So it was really nice to just experience that, to be like, oh, I see what Maggie's always talking about now. This is very simple. I had a really good time with this. What's interesting is there's 2 modes to the solo mode, so you can play with just 2 different colored workers, or you can make it more complex and have 3 different sets of workers, and then you're going to block yourself even more, so there's even more restrictions placed on you in terms of where you can go each round. So you really have to plan ahead for what you're going to do. And then there's also a mini little campaign mode as well, because in this game the variety really comes from the different decks that you're putting out to that have different buildings that you're going to be allowed to build, and the campaign mode in solo allows you to go through those decks and cycle through and see all of the cards. So that was really cool, I thought. So that is my number 6. Thank you. Newsfjord. Now, okay, so my number 5. What's it gonna be?
My number 5 is another new addition to the list.
Oh, another multiplayer game.
Another multiplayer game that we had played a lot. Well, the franchise, I guess. But then this one I played solo and I was like, wow. This is Great Western Trail New Zealand, where Great Western Trail obviously is the sort of deck building game where you are going to usually go through around this rondel and having and this one is sheep, usually it's cattle, but here you've got a range of sheep, you're a sheep, a run holder, I always forget the name, you manage a sheep station, and so you're trying to gain points in a variety of ways. So one of them is going to be acquiring more higher quality sheep and more variety, so that you can deliver them as you're going around your rondel, deliver them to Wellington, and then for each individual different one that you have, you're going to get money. But then in this game, you also they're introducing the ability of shearing sheep along the way. So it's another way of using your hand and also clearing up and shifting your hand, because again, it's all about the variety by the time you reach that end point of the rondel. So you can shear sheep, you can construct other buildings along the way, which again are going to give you more abilities that usually only you can use, and also points. And you can recruit specialists that will help you kind of make all these other bits more powerful. You're constantly, as you're delivering, you're making your board more powerful. So it's an excellent, supermassive Euro experience. The solo does have a bot, which I'm usually not super keen on. It's Sarah.
Her name is Sarah.
Sarah, a woman of great character, but great as in Great Western Trail, and I was so impressed. So when I saw the bot, I was like, oh no, and then I thought I'd try, and I was like, this is actually really smooth to implement, because all that Sarah does is you reveal a card for Sarah. Sarah has her own board where she's kind of keeping track of her workers that she's recruiting, so she is going to be stealing some of the workers from the pool. But she just has usually how many steps Sarah's taking, which is just going to be making sure that Wellington gets triggered on a regular basis, and then what action is she taking. But the actions are really streamlined and simplified, and then she's just going to be usually collecting points along the way by stealing some of those cards that are available usually for you as well from markets and things, and then by placing her discs in different areas. I find that it's so simple that it doesn't really interrupt what I was thinking, and it's I just love that I get to have the full Great Western Trail, just like lose myself into, okay, what am I going to do this game? And by the time I facilitate Sarah, I come back and I'm fine. That's what I usually dislike, is if I go and facilitate an automa and I'm like, what was I doing? I can't even remember but
so basically
smooth.
You in a multiplayer game.
Yes, that's exactly what I
want.
want.
So it actually recreates it perfectly.
Yes.
You're
So
like, wait, what?
I was so taken by this, and I love the Great Western Trail, just the franchise. And New Zealand is my favorite because of all of the things that have been introduced. It's just the right level of complexity and just, variety for me.
And so we have played a lot of this game in our household, the Great Western Trail original, and now we've been playing New Zealand a lot. And it is a multiplayer experience that I absolutely adore. This was a really interesting journey for me. This was my first game ever, I think, playing with an automa that is getting its own score that you're trying to beat, and also having to facilitate an automa. And yes, I know everyone out there is probably thinking like, this is such a simple automa. But for me, it was like, this is like what you mean when you say you have to facilitate an automa. There's like all these steps involved. And I don't know. I just found this one so interesting because even though it was quite easy to implement, I found myself completely demotivated playing against a fictional character. And the idea of it generating a somewhat arbitrary or randomized score at the end that it had to beat was like just not motivating for me, versus like if a scorebook it's a rule book that has a score in it that says like,
which is interesting because it's technically a similar concept.
It's similar.
It's kind of implementing it along the way.
But I suppose it's like I'm finding that when I play solo, I like it to be like just an even playing field with like very little luck, and I can beat my score. And so, or beat the score that's in the rule book that says 100 is good, and then I feel all validated. But if I'm to get a score like in this one versus an automa that I perceive to be very random, I found myself as I was playing this just I don't even care where I go.
Aww.
Like, I just got to that point where I was like, I just feel really lonely.
Aww.
And that was just a really interesting experience because I love this game so much.
Yeah.
And because it has quite a bit of interaction and like when you're building buildings and people have to pay you and maybe you draft the cards that they wanted and you know that sense of like, oh, I'm going to get that before you or I'm going to place my token here and unlock these goodies. I don't know, that sense of momentum and interest in what other people are doing, with that removed, I didn't love it.
Well, I think it's because like you connect with games more for the experience that it gives you with almost like the relationship of the people in that table. Whereas I connect with games for the game. It's almost like the people on the table are helping facilitate the game. Yeah. But it's like, it's interesting because it's just like I'm very much a more like in my head type person and like in my own little world. And it's like I just want to figure out this puzzle, but I'm less interested in like, but what's this person? And I actually really struggle to keep track of like what is everyone else doing and what's a
I love the flexing your strategy based on what other people are doing around the table. Like I really like that influx, like having to like adjust what you're doing. You know, when you're playing a game of chess and someone makes a move, and so the strategy that you had, maybe you need to go to plan B.
I'm more fixed. I get like an idea in my head and I'm like, I want to try this thing to see how it plays out. And usually if I'm playing with other players, they get in the way of that because they make me have to like...
also, they take advantage of that too.
Exactly.
Because
like, they take advantage
you know what
like,
Maggie's going to do.
Of my fixed position.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
like
5? If you're like me, Sarah, the woman of great character, is going to be a great solo for Great Western Trail.
I was writing my notes, you know, after I played every game on Maggie's list solo, and I was like, today I did Dear Diary. Today I met Sarah, and and I learned a lot about myself. It was a very interesting experience. Okay, sorry, what's your number 4?
Number 4. Number 4 is an interesting one because it's actually a game that was on my previous list, but this is sort of like now a new version of that same game. And so that is Imperium Horizons. So Imperium Classics and Legends, and I kind of put them all together because they're all really just more factions of the same game. It's not like this is one standalone game, even though any one box that you buy is their own standalone game, but they're all sort of meant to be played like you're essentially in this game, every player takes the role of one civilization. Each civilization plays entirely asymmetrically. They have their own deck and even their own strategy and the way that they go about essentially trying to develop that civilization and unlock the most points or the highest score possible. So with it's really interesting because it is sort of like a deck. It's a deck building game, but you're mostly just cycling through your own deck. As you cycle through your deck, you're getting access to these other cards, more powerful cards called Ascension cards. And then once you get through all of your Ascension cards, which means you're building up your deck into something that's really powerful, you're also wanting to kind of get rid of cards and kind of play them out so that they're not in your deck. So you can, again, keep going through that. You're going to reach your nation card, which then turns your empire, usually from a barbarian state to an empire, like your state, from a barbarian state to an empire state. And then you can start accessing some cards that are called developments, which are usually a lot of the ones that have victory points in them, and they're more like the end game type conditions. Now, that's a sort of general thing of the game, but having said that, every single civilization, and there are, with Classics and Legends, it's 8 in each, and I think it's 14 in this one, so that's what, like 30 total civilizations that you now have to play with. They all play very, very differently, and what you're trying to do with them, the strategy that you use is very, very different. So with this one, I just love getting lost in each one of those, and I really enjoy games that have card play and card management and deck buildings. So
there's a lot on this list now that I think about it.
So I just love just the tactileness of the cards and going through, even just sorting the cards, even organizing like the card, like setting it up, and I love that. So with Horizons, the reason I kind of picked this is because it introduces this new trades routes module expansion that is sort of optional, but it is backwards compatible with the other civilizations. However, some of the new civilizations require it. And I actually really, really enjoy that module. I feel like it adds all these different elements of positive player interaction, even when you're playing with a bot. Having said that, speaking of the bot, this is probably the most complex bot of all of the games
on this list.
On this list. Yeah, on this list. But because every civilization that you play against has a bought card, and what you're going to be doing is they are going to be again cycling through their civilization like just like another player would. But then every time you're playing, or they're playing one of their cards, which you're facilitating for them, you're going through the bought card, and it tells you what, based on the type of card or the icons on the card, how you need to resolve that. So there is a big sort of stop, facilitate the full turn of the bot, so resolve all of their cards, and then come back to you. So, but there's quite a, like, the cards can be quite intimidating in terms of the sequence of things. But because it's quite a long game, like I find that whenever I play the solo, I rarely do this in under 2 hours. Like, it's a long experience. By the time that you're kind of playing it, it's very easy to kind of memorize what the different cards do. So I end up not even referencing the bot card as much. So it, again, manages to not feel like it gets in the way as much, even though it looks super intimidating as a bot or automa.
So much design effort, like to come up with all of the players' civilizations and then all of these different opponent civilizations with the automa.
Yeah, well, that's like,
there's so many in there.
There are so many, and every single one plays differently. But the bots, again, like the bot is fairly easy to facilitate, and that they all just kind of have, and usually it's going to be, okay, if it's this type of card, this is what they're going to do. They're going to exile a card from the market, they're going to play this card, or they're going to put an unrest card back in the... So it's just more a little bit of admin, which again is the kind of stuff that I would really dislike in a solo experience. But for some reason, in this one, I don't mind. I really don't mind.
Yeah, so Great Western Trail is a game that I absolutely adore, and playing it solo changed my experience. I didn't enjoy it as much. This one, playing it solo, didn't change my mind about the game.
Because you already weren't that.
But I've never been a huge fan of this series. And there's, it's just not, it's not what I enjoy about games. It's as a multiplayer experience, it's extremely long, but also it is just very multiplayer solitaire. To be fair, I have not played with this new trade route in a multiplayer environment, but I did play this game solo, and for the first time, and I found the automa quite overwhelming because the game itself is quite overwhelming. And again, I only played it once solo, and so everyone watching is like, yeah, but I guess the beauty in this game comes from when you actually learn a lot about the civilization that you're playing as, and then you know how to optimize for that civilization. I definitely didn't know that, and so when I was playing, I felt not only lost in like what I was trying to achieve with my civ, I was then having to facilitate this automa that was just kind of getting in my way. And what I thought was interesting about this is, on your turn, you could just innovate, which is just to grab a new card and to kind of place it into your deck. And then you would have to then go and do the automa again.
That's quite a powerful action. Like, because usually you get to take usually either 3 actions from playing stuff your card, or innovate, which is break through for a card, which means you get to take any card, well, most cards, from the market without any, usually they come with like a nasty card, like an unrest card, without any unrest. And so it's quite powerful, but it means that that's it, that's your turn.
Yeah, that's your turn. So you've just finished completing the automa, which sometimes you have to resolve like 4 cards, like it's a lot.
That's more.
And then
I gave her the baby automa. I gave her like
the baby automa was enough. The baby automa was enough. Anyway, so I can see how the solo is replicating kind of the experience of the game. So if you're like Maggie and you don't mind that, like it's a bit grindy for me. The game itself,
you're cycling through, and you're like, you are kind of grinding to try and get through that ascension deck.
Anyway,
but solo, and if you like that sort of exploration like this, I feel like if you leave me in a deserted island with this box, like I will probably have enough game to last me the rest of my life, just like figuring out these civilizations. So there you go. That's Imperium Horizons.
And now we're into the top 3.
Ooh, top 3.
Top 3 solo games of all time.
2024 edition. Because who knows? By the end of this year, there might be some. So the number 3 is another game that was already on my list, but this one, the what do you call it? The franchise was on my list, but now it's a new. The old one.
I've played all of these. I can't think of what it is.
And the new one is so it's a new version. And that is Sleeping Gods Distant Skies. So Sleeping Gods, which, that was in my my previous list. I loved that it introduced me to this sort of epic narrative world adventure campaign type mode where you're just discovering for hours and hours and hours, and the writing of it was always really like appealing, like just like going into this area and you're discovering this thing, and then with Sleeping God Distant Skies, what's happened is a lot of the mechanics that used to be sometimes a little bit clunky or a little bit like cause a bit of friction, they've been really streamlined. And so you now in Sleeping God's Distant Skies, the previous one, you were out in the Wandering Seas. You're now, you and your crew were in a cargo plane that happened to cross this mysterious portal in the sky, and you now find yourself in this bizarre, fantastical land where there are these gods that are no longer sleeping. It's like, this is sort of like a sequel-ish to the Sleeping Gods. You don't need to have played the other one. You're not going to be lost or anything like that. It sort of takes place in the same universe, a bit after this. So the sleeping gods have awakened, but they're really weak. And so you're trying to then figure out, well, one, discover and figure out what's going on, and then try and help collect totems so that you can give them to one of these gods to try and like maybe like help you get home, essentially, figure out a way. Because there are, I think this is not a spoiler, there's a big monster that's trying to harass us and everyone else. So that's what we're going to try and like figure out a way of taming. But so in terms of the flow of what you're doing, you have this beautiful map that you're kind of moving through. So it sort of represents all the areas that you are discovering. And you have a plane as well. So you now can actually go through different, like jump to different areas of the map, because it's gonna cost you usually time and fuel. But there are ways of topping up your fuel again. And then, you're just going to be going around discovering, meeting characters, making a lot of choices. It's a lot of kind of like choose your own adventure elements to it, where you explore an area, and then it'll give you, what do you do? Like, that happens, this is this, what do you do? Choose A, choose B. And there's challenges as well. You've got your range of all 5 characters that you're controlling, and you can equip them with different things, and they're all good at different things. So if there's a perception challenge or this challenge, or you're kind of spending those icons to help overcome those things. And there is a bit of combat as well, which has been streamlined. So this is just, and again, like I remember when I put it on the table, started playing it again, I was like, oh, that's right. Like, the writing of this is so good. Like, I just really enjoy like the discovery of this and the like, and so that's why, this has kind of come up on the list, and it's just now better. I will say there's a foreteller narration of this that I found that was, even though, I sort of tend to not use it, because even though I like the soundtrack of it, like the music and the sound effects for atmosphere, I find that I'm just faster. You still need to have the book to reference for different things. And there are some things that are not in the narration that you still have to reference in the kind of written story. So, and I just found that like to navigate it wasn't the smoothest thing. So I just find that it's easier to just read it from the book. But what an incredible world that's been created here. So,
I have some thoughts on this. So Sleeping Gods, the original, if you watch the channel, you know it was probably one of my lowest rated games that we've rated in our series, 10 out of 10. And that's like nothing against the game, just not a game for me. When I played it, we played it cooperatively, not a huge cooperative
it's a co-op
fan.
game,
And, playing it, it just had a ton of narrative that I really struggled through and ultimately ended up not playing it with Maggie, and Maggie played the original. So that's one part of it. So there's 2 things. One, I think the mechanics are streamlined in this edition. I actually found the spending of the time and energy and the way everything worked, it just felt more intuitive. And so because it was just me and I was in control of those things, I felt like a much better sense of everything hanging together really well. I thought the writing was really good when I had to turn to the writing, and there wasn't too much of it. And I really enjoyed the decision making, those full color pages in the book where you are allocating your team members to that. It felt like I just had a lot more interesting choices. Even using the resources, I just found that more interesting as well, and collecting them and using them in battles. And I actually had a really good time with this game. I was really, really surprised, because I went in thinking, this is not going to be for me. But the other element, so part of it is I think they've streamlined a lot of things. I think this game is better. But the second thing is that also not playing it cooperatively, playing it where I had a control of all of the characters gave me a much stronger sense of control and less elements of like just the discussion that I don't particularly thrive in that when it comes to a cooperative experience. So actually playing the solo I liked much more than playing cooperatively. So 2 big surprises for me with Sleeping Gods Distant Skies kind of came out of nowhere, but now I can appreciate all those people that are out there, you know, especially, like, yes, if you enjoy playing co-op for sure, but if you enjoy this game solo, I can see why. Like, it is just a huge experience. And it's really satisfying going through those battles. Like, and I don't normally even enjoy battling in games, but there's lots of like really nice decisions that you make. So,
I was so surprised seeing you play and go, okay.
Interesting.
Because it was like dread. It was like, okay, we're coming up to Sleeping Gods. This is going. You're like, oh no, okay,
there was a bit of dread.
And then like seeing you go, oh okay. Ooh. I'm like, oh, she's into it.
I was, and I quite enjoyed like spending the tokens for the character actions, exhausting certain characters. Yeah, surprise.
Oh, it's an epic, again, hours and hours and hours of epic narrative and just beautiful world creation.
But now I can see, why it's your number 3.
Number 3, Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies. Now, let's see. Number 2. So interesting, number 2, I had mentioned in my previous list as an honorable mention. And this year, I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna put it as my number 2. So I went from an honorable mention to, you know what? I love this.
Skyrocketing.
And I don't care who hears it.
I know what it is.
I'm gonna scream my love from the rooftops. I'm gonna be, and that is Stardew Valley, the board game. Now, the reason I didn't include this, and I even mentioned this earlier on when I was talking about Mythwind, it's like, it's kind of recreating the Stardew Valley, which is one of my favorite video games. This is actually based on the video game itself. So it's the same IP, same world. And you're doing a lot of the same things that you do in Stardew Valley. So you've got, your farm, and you've got all the locals in town that you're trying to befriend, potentially marry. And you can go fishing, you can go to the mines, you can construct all these different buildings and enhance your farm. So the reason this wasn't in my list and it was an honorable mention is because the way that it's intended, so this is a co-op game, but the way that it's intended is you just play one game, and in one game you have usually 6 community bundles that you have to solve, and you have 4 grandpa goals that you need to resolve by the end of it. And if you haven't, then it's like you failed the game. And it's like, that doesn't feel, even though the way the game has been put together feels so much like Stardew Valley, that doesn't feel like it. That's a very tense experience of like that win-fail. It's like in Stardew Valley.
Hard.
And it's quite hard. It can be. And it can be very luck dependent as well, because there's some things that are like dice rolling.
Yes.
And I'm like, this just takes away that element that I love about Stardew, which is just an open world. You spend as long as you want. You can focus on whatever you want at any given time and spend on it as long as you want, essentially. So I created my own version, which was inspired by Newsfear's campaign mode of going, hey, what if we just, and there's enough cards here to, instead of just playing one game, which is 1 year, you can actually play 5 years by creating the season deck, and you're not repeating any cards. So there's actually enough to create a 5-year, sort of season, like 5-year campaign. And then the whole thing is you're actually just trying, like in the game, complete and do as much as you can, or at least everything. So I call it the completionist campaign. I'll put a link, because I actually did a video back in the day of like the campaign mode that I use for this, my own hack, so that you can see how it all plays together. And that just opened this up for me to the point where I was like, I just then love sitting there and just spending hours and hours just in this sort of super peaceful, there's no combat, the stress is not negative stress. Now it's like, I'm not actually stressed, because it's like I have 5 years to complete all of these things. So maybe I'll just, in the earlier years, I'll try and focus on these things because they're easier, and then later on I will go through these others. And it's just, I love this game. Like I love it, and I love it in that mode. So that's why, because it's a hack mode, I made it a honorable mention. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to put it as a number 2 with my hack mode, like with the completionist campaign mode. So
And Maggie spent hundreds of hours in the video
it.
game, and so it's not surprising that she's trying to make the board game as long as possible. But I did notice that, in particular with this one, she set me up, told me how to play it solo, and then she went away, but she didn't really go away. She was kind of loitering around, like looking over my shoulder.
What are you doing?
Like, how are you going now? How are you going now? And I could just tell that you wanted to be playing as well. Like, you're just like jealous of my
jealous. And it's just like, it's just so good. Like, I often haven't really understood, like, often you're at a con and you're playing and people kind of come over and they just watch you play. I've often been like, I'm like, I don't understand why you would sort of stand and watch because it's not as fun. I understood it with this because I was just watching Amy play going, no, this is fun. I mean,
but also, when I did play this game, Maggie was like, oh, you're done for, basically.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you've
got no hope.
Well, no, because Amy didn't want to do the completionist thing. She's like, no, I want to do it proper. Like, I just want to beat it in 1 year. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you're like,
good luck because you're doing terribly.
Fall,
and then you came back and I was on the verge of winning and you were like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
That, well, for me, that's what I did enjoy about this solo mode. I found it like quite punishing. So even though the game itself is very, very luck driven, there's a lot of like just kind of, I'll wander over there and I'll turn over these things and hopefully it's exactly what I need. But across the course of the game, you're kind of mitigating against that because you're trying to focus on those, grandpa goals that you need to complete. I found it really challenging to turn over the bundles and then find out that I've got this sudden new goal, which I left way too late in the game. So if I was to play it again, I definitely wouldn't do that again. That was very stressful.
Yeah. But that happens in the video game as well. Like, halfway through fall, you realize that, one of the bundles in the community center needs something from spring and I don't have it. So it does teach you to hoard things because you're like, I'm just going to hold everything in the video game because you never know when you're going to need it.
Okay, well, that was very true to the board game as well. But
in the video game, you have more years, whereas here it's just like, it's again. So it's like, no.
Yeah, but what I did like about this is I just actually enjoy what you're doing. So I enjoy the farming element. I enjoy fishing a lot. Like I probably do more fishing than anything else in this game. I'm often just like, I'm going to go and try and catch that fish. Why? I don't know. Because it's fun. There's a lot of dice rolling, which is usually not my thing. But because it's so punishing, I was surprised by the solo mode. I was like, this is quite good. It's a good puzzle.
Love this.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough about that. But is it enough? It's never enough. So that's Stardew Valley, the board game with
Number 1
asterisk completionist campaign version mode.
If you're watching this now, you can probably guess what number 1 is.
Number 1 has not changed. And everyone's like, dude, what do you think it is? It's still the same. Let me just see if I can.
Still number 1. The whole list has really shifted and changed around this game, but this has not moved.
Continues to be number 1, and that is A Feast for Odin.
Did you just shake everything? It all fell out again?
Yes. I remember, I think the last time we covered this, I did that, and it was like and we were like, oh no. And then we didn't open the box until recently when I was like, hey, I need to cover this and get you to play the solo. And the pieces were everywhere. So hopefully, anyways, so Feast for Odin, very similar to what we spoke before in terms of how the solo mode works. This was the first time, like Newsfjord, where you are only there's no automa, you just play 2 colors, but both colors are you, and you just play one round with one color, and then the next round you're playing with the other color, and the previous color is blocking you, so you're blocking your own spaces, and you have to go around where you went the previous turn. But Feast for Odin is all about taking all these worker placement actions to collect all these different polyomino pieces to then feng shui your way, store them efficiently in all the different storage areas that you have, either your home board, or you can get different sheds or other things, or you can go and acquire different islands, and all of those things, as you complete them, will give you points. But if you don't complete them, it's going to be negative points in a lot of different areas. And they're very finicky about how these things can be adjacent to one another. And you always have to feed your workers, so there's just so much game. This is one of those games that I've been playing it a lot online, so Board Game Arena. Every time I go into it, I was like, oh, that's right. I just love the decision space and all of the different, and I try and do it in a really pacifist way, and I try and do it without going whaling, and I try and do it without going pillaging. And it's very, very hard because it's those 2 things often give you a lot of the points and stuff. But oh my gosh, the variety of choices and avenues that you can go down and strategies. And, do you want to go like farm strong or like animal strong and just kind of concentrate on the animal strategy, or do immigration, like kind of build boats and just migrate your Vikings.
And
there's just so much.
There's so much. And for that reason, it is currently both of our number one games. So we started 10 out of 10, so where we're rating all of our games to see if this game would be dethroned as our number one game of all time. It is yet to be dethroned, so it's still our favorite game. We always play it with the Norwegian expansion, so just to add that in, it does rebalance things a little bit and add in even more strategies, which is really fun. But this was my first time ever playing this game solo, so it is a beast to set up. Maggie set it all up for me beautifully, and then she taught me...
I love setting this up. It's like again, it's like with Darty, it's like, I just love,
Yeah, and then she taught me, how to basically play solo, which is super easy because you're just playing with two different colored sets of meeples. So again, I got to appreciate, especially after playing Great Western Trail and things that had Imperium and Imperium. I was like, Feast for Odin, what a breath of fresh air. I can just like block myself. So that was a really interesting experience. I found maybe not to the same extent as Great Western Trail, but certainly for me in the worker placement spaces, I love like the turn order element and the competitiveness of that.
Multiplayer, you mean?
In multiplayer. So here I knew that no one was going to block my spaces except for me. So I could plan out, well, I'll go here this time, and every second turn I'll use that particular action. So that kind of was already in my head. Whereas normally there's just the chaos of like, oh, please don't take that spot.
And if you take the element of surprise and having to adjust to
I do. So someone takes that spot and I'm like, oh, okay, plan B. Luckily I have a plan B and I'll do that later. So I really love that. So basically playing this solo removed that competitive element of it that I love. But what did it retain? It retains the amazing puzzle that is A Feast for Odin. And there's something that people really like, it's quite polarizing. Some people really hate that you start with so many negative points. Like a lot of people, a lot of people hate that feeling of starting so far back and having to work your way back to get to zero. I love it. I find it super motivating and just looking at it going, oh my goodness, every time to cover those. You never think you're going to make it, and then you do, but you never think that you're going to do it in this game.
And I love like, so you're like, who can even get islands? Like, I've got enough with just my main thing, and then you're like, the more you play, you're like, I've got this whole engine going with generating goods and stuff.
So it retains that. I feel it lost a little bit on the worker placement, but ultimately this game, it does a fairly decent job solo recreating the multiplayer experience. And it's very simple for such a complex game, such a simple solo implementation. So I really appreciated that, and I can see why it's your number one.
So that is my list. So now I would be interested to hear your ranking.
Yeah, my ranking is
my 10.
Honestly, looking at the games and going into this with just like an open mind, I was like, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to play each one of these games solo.
And I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
That was also a very enjoyable experience for me to see you go through that and like
the range of emotions that I went through.
But also get to teach you like, oh, this is how this is like. It's like showing you a little bit of my world.
Yeah.
That was really nice.
Yeah. It was fun at times, and it was very lonely at times.
It was the worst of times.
It was. For someone that's just not inclined to play games by myself. But this was my list. So my number 10 was Imperium Horizon. So everyone knows how I feel about that game. It didn't change how I felt about that game, and I felt very not great playing it. I was just like,
and it's the most complicated bot, to be fair, as well.
It was the most complicated bot, so there was that, but then also the game is just long, and it's like, it's just the grind of that game that just, it doesn't resonate with me. It didn't change anything, so no surprises there.
Okay.
My number 9 was Mythwind, and again, kind of the same. When you play it solo, it's the same game, and the game is a grind, not my thing.
The grind's the thing, just like Shakespeare's the play's the thing. I think it was Shakespeare, but the grind's the thing with these games.
It is, so again, not surprising. That was my number 9. My number 8 was Great Western Trail. That one was surprising to me because I do absolutely adore the game, but again, I felt like it just changed the competitiveness of it enough that I felt I just didn't care what happened. And that's not what you want in a game. I don't want to feel like I don't really care what I do next. So that was, surprising.
Still like to have that against other people, not this sort of inanimate.
Yeah,
Watermark.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And then the next was Bloody Inn.
Yeah.
And so that, I don't really resonate with the theme of that. I didn't talk about much how I felt about that one, but I don't love the theme. I do love the artwork, and I didn't mind the cycling of the cards and the hand management element. I liked the having to think about when I spent cards versus when I kept them in my hand. I lost abysmally my first game. And then my second game I won like quite significantly. So I felt like there was a big learning curve for this game.
You're like, is that good? Like, no.
Yeah,
the first game was like, because he's like, don't tell me what the scores are. Like,
I'll just see how I go.
Threshold.
Oh, I did terribly.
Yeah.
But then I also find like, there's the cycling. I found it really repetitive. So again, the grind. The grind comes out, and I'm
there's
like,
a theme. There's a recurring theme here. I seem to love grind.
Yes, you do.
Card grind in particular.
Yes, and I do not, because I just suddenly I'm like, I'm just like doing the same thing over and over again. So so no. 6 was Sleeping Gods. That was a big surprise for me. Ultimately, it's still not the style of game that I'd sit down and play like a lot by myself. And then that's interesting because as a co-op, I don't really enjoy it either. But I'm comparing it to maybe like the recent game Flow, which is an adventure game as well, where you're battling and doing things, but there's still this overarching competitiveness that drives you forward. And so...
And there's no narrative to read.
And no narrative. But I don't know. There's something about it actually that that I'm kind of intrigued to play more.
We planted the seed.
Yeah, I don't know. Distant Skies.
I just need to water it. Keep watering it, keep nurturing it. And be like, maybe I will play another round.
There's also like quite a lot of setup. There's quite a lot of things going on. So
this is more
it's a
streamlined.
big commitment.
Yeah, it feels like it's more, even the setup is more streamlined than the original Sleeping Gods. But there's still quite a lot of little bits and pieces and bits.
Yeah. Okay, so my number 5 is Feast for Odin. Again, surprising that it's lower down the list given how much I love that game, but because it took away the competitiveness of the worker placement spots, and not as like, oh, I'm so excited. Oh, you know what else I love about that game? When you're playing socially in a multiplayer game and you're like, ooh, I get to go shopping. And and that's like one of our favorite things with our friends is passing around the tiles that are like
all the jewelry and all the
little treasures and things. So that element was like, when I was
no
by
one's
myself.
Competing. But no one's taking this away.
Not even competing, just like showcasing the amazing thing, like kind of having a witness to your brilliance.
I can relate to that in the sense, like not with this game, but for example, another game that I absolutely love and I just don't connect with solo is Obsession. So so I love that game and it has a great solo mode, but the thing that I love the most about that game is the banter that you generate. I'm going to hold this event and I'm going to do this and I'm going to invite, and you lose that when it's just playing by yourself. So that's why it's not featured on this list, even though I'll give it a shout out. It is an excellent solo mode. It's just not the type that I...
And part of it is the banter, like, going shopping and what am I going to take? And that's really fun. And then part of it is like, did you see that? Like, look what I did. Look, it fits on my puzzle perfectly.
You do enjoy a good witnessing.
I do.
Look what I did.
It's like, I'm so smart. Look what I did. So when you take that away, I'm like,
I was trying to think, like, while you were playing, I was like, maybe I should try and do that and just be very encouraging, going, well done, you did this. And like, maybe get you to...
You can't taint the solo experience.
I know. I was trying to get you to like it even more.
So number 4 is Stardew Valley. Surprised that this was so high. A lot of luck in it, but I found it so challenging, the puzzle, to complete it, even in the midst of all this luck and the lack of control often you have over that it was, when I won, it was really satisfying and I didn't expect that, but I was like, oh my goodness. And I've removed Joja from everywhere, and I am like, look at me go. To be fair, I did that witnessing thing again, where at the end of the game, I'm like, Maggie, come over and have a look.
Validate the experience that I just had.
I nailed it. You said I wasn't going to, and I did.
You really, I was very impressed.
And then the top 3 for me is For Northwood, a trick-taking game. I love trick-taking. At first I was like, how could this possibly be good solo? It is really good. And it's really, really addictive as well, in that, you know, you fail a game, you're like, okay, okay, no, I've got this. I'm going to do it again. And I really enjoy like learning those powers, the amount of control you have over to mitigate the luck of the cards. Really enjoyed that. And not surprising because that is made for solo.
Yes.
So I enjoy that puzzle. Another game that is made for solo is my number 2, which is Witchcraft. I just thought that game is excellent in terms of its design. And you know, we hear a lot of good things about Resist.
Yeah.
So not surprised, like, you know, it's been refined, the design, and it's really, really great. So if you're just looking for something that's really easy to set up, but feels like a meaty experience, there's quite a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it's a really challenging puzzle.
Super challenging, yeah.
It's beautifully illustrated. There's a lot to like there.
Yeah.
That is a game where I can imagine myself sitting down and just playing again. So that is, which is a lot for me.
That is
because
wild. You don't understand how wild that statement is.
Yeah.
Like,
So I could sit down and happily play that and try and work my way through that game. So, and that leaves one, which is Newsford. That is my number 1. And, you know, Maggie actually set me up and then she went out and left me to play this game. And I played it once and then I played it twice. And then I was like, maybe I could try the advanced solo mode. So I'm reading the event, set myself up for the advanced solo mode. And Maggie gets home and I'm halfway through like the campaign mode.
Yeah. She's
And
like, I want to do the campaign, like all the different games. Like,
Yeah.
what just happened? Like, what?
And it's something about this game that, well, first of all, it's so buttery smooth, the best of everything, because Feast for Odin has the same, like blocking yourself dynamic, but there's so much more admin in Feast for Odin that it feels clunkier, and actually without other people to help you with the setup of some of these games. So, you know, when you have a multiplayer experience and you're like, oh, hey, can you just refresh the mountain over there? Well, I had to do all of that. So I found that a bit
solo life.
I
Yeah.
found that a bit cumbersome. But with Newsford, there's very little of that. Everything is very streamlined. So it's just, it was fast, it was engaging, and every time I got to the end, I was like, I did a little bit better.
Yeah.
And now I want to try again.
So satisfying.
And there's so many different decks as well, and we have some of the expansions, so there's just a lot of gameplay there. It's easy to set up. A lot to like about Newsford as a multiplayer game, but I really, really loved it solo.
There you go. There you go.
So there you go.
That is the top 10. So my top 10 best solo games of all time as of 2024 with
My first impressions of Maggie's top 10.
For Amy's consideration and ranking. And now, I feel like we both learned a lot about each other. There was a good journey.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments, what are your favorite games out of Maggie's top 10. There were some that I was surprised fell off the list. Things like Terraforming Mars. I was like,
actually,
are you sure?
I want to say, things that fell off the list, it doesn't mean that I feel any, well, with most of them, it doesn't mean that I feel differently about it. I still think they are excellent games. It's just if I look at where I am now, and I think since I did that first list, we've played over 500 games easily, well over. So it's like you've had a lot more games, and I've also been able to see what hits the table and how I still relate to things as time goes by. So there's still so many games that didn't make the list that are excellent games. It's just I had to cut it down to 10. I actually even had like 10. I could do a 10 small box and 10 big box, and it was like let's just do the hard choices of going, if I had to narrow it down to 10, these are my top 10.
These are the 10 that you'd be taking to that deserted island.
And I would be happy. Like if I don't get a new game for the rest of my life and I just have those 10, I would be very, very happy.
And I would be number 11 to take these 10 games and then maybe think about packing me.
There's sort of enough space.
Maybe come along.
If you can fit there.
Yeah.
You can,
And if you leave me alone while I'm playing these games. So we hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.